What up is Marcus with Dynasty Football Dads, where we give you Dynasty Fantasy Football daily. Now we are doing the top biggest buys. Now these are buys that we want to do fairly quickly here before the free agencies, before the draft hits, and a lot of things can change. Now, not only are we going to give you two people on the exact same team in the exact same position, which seems counterproductive, but we're going to be giving you a couple other good players as well. My first buy is a rookie of last year, but his name is Darnell Mooney. And if you don't know who he is, because sometimes that's a name that you're like, whoa, who is that? I don't recognize that name. He was a fifth rounder out of Tulane, and he went to Chicago. And so we all, or a lot of us in the fantasy community, thought that Anthony Miller was going to be the next guy. And it just seems like Darnell Mooney has already skipped ahead of Anthony Miller. And we think of what could happen with Allen Robinson. I don't believe Allen Robinson's going to sign as a Bear. I don't think he's going to re-sign there. I think the ties have kind of been already severed. There's been issues with the relationship of the upper staff and Allen Robinson, and you just look at what is potentially could be there. I mean, yeah, Trubisky has shown some issues of being very inconsistent, but Darnell Mooney could be a really good wide receiver 2 in that kind of spot. Wide receiver 2 on that team. Even if they get a free agency, I really like Darnell Mooney's floor of how consistent he could be in the next couple years. I mean, we look at what Darnell Mooney even did with his first paycheck. I love the story that was brought. The first thing he did with his first game, or his first paycheck, was bought a jugs machine. And I really like players that really want to hone their craft and do really well at trying to improve themselves each and every day. And Darnell Mooney has done that. I mean, he runs great routes, and he had good stats for his rookie season, considering that he did start off a little slow like rookies do, but he had 61 receptions for 631 yards. And if you ask that out of a second or third round receiver, I mean, you would have been like, oh yeah, that's a really good first year. I usually don't like fifth round wide receivers when it comes to draft capital, but just like I did last year when I liked Darius Slayton, this is my fourth round and later type of guy that I would like to buy. I mean, week 2 through 17, he played 77% of the snaps. So he's on the field a ton, which is part of the process. You got to be on the field. And he had 17% target share. Again, that's a pretty good target share for somebody being a fifth round wide receiver and trying to get into hone into the being a part of the system. I mean, that doesn't happen for a lot of rookies, and being a fifth rounder and having that, and he's fast too, 4.38 speed. He is a fast, quick player. My next person is a player that might not even be on his team right now, might not be on Carolina still, but it is going to be Curtis Samuel. And Curtis Samuel, there was a lot of, I guess, well, who's going to be better in long term? Is it going to be Curtis Samuel? Is it going to be DJ Moore? And ultimately, we had an idea that we thought it was going to be DJ Moore. I thought it was going to be DJ Moore. Invested into that player, and I didn't really invest into Curtis Samuel as much, even though Curtis Samuel was a second round pick out of Ohio State. Was a good player too, and did well. Since week 9, he had a pace of 1,077 yards and 5 touchdowns. Had a really, really good pace. And then 5 of his last 6 games had 5 receptions for 68 yards. So, I mean, consistent. And we're talking 5 receptions, 68 yards. You have that every week. Plus, he had a little bit of rushing, and he had some touchdowns in there as well. Curtis Samuel really started getting into his own. And I could see him being a really good fit for like a Saints team or something like that. I don't know Emmanuel Sanders' contract, but a team like that could really utilize a player, or even like a Green Bay. Like, these are teams that he could just shoot up. All of a sudden he's wide receiver 2 on Green Bay, and you're like, okay, well now Curtis Samuel his stock could like shoot up. And so these are players that we want to get now. And he turns 25 in August, so he's still a super young player. And we're talking, like, usually prime is 26, 27, 28. We're still getting into things. He's right before that prime age. And a second rounder, meaning that he had a lot of draft capital at that time. And so he showed that he can be a really good player if he's utilized correctly. So that's my number 2 buy. My number 3 buy is another good player, another second round pick, and he's going to have not a new team, but a new quarterback. Well, should. It's DJ Chark. DJ Chark, I've loved DJ Chark. His first year was not great at all. And I went and bought And then now his second year, his second year went really well. And now he's going to have Trevor Lawrence. And I know he had some injuries last year. And we talk about his injuries last year. He still had 93 targets in 13 games. They just didn't have any good quarterback play. Gardner Minshew was hurt, benched, and then they had other quarterbacks that I barely even remember their names are because they're not great. They're not great quarterbacks. And so he had that issue, and of course being hurt as well. But he had 20% target share, and when you have a 20% target share on a Jacksonville team that should have an increase in passing offense, at least efficiency, that's gonna be awesome. And he had 29 deep targets, and Trevor Lawrence can throw the deep ball. You're going to be looking at DJ Chark as potentially getting back into those top 24 to top 20 wide receiver. And I would not be shocked if you see DJ Chark finish as wide receiver like 13, 14, and we're sitting there going, okay, that would make sense. And and he's still super young, so we need to start buying him now. Another might buy number 4 is going to be Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, I think everyone's trying to buy him the last 3 years because he just had this huge spark score. He's had the speed, the acceleration, the strength, everything was off the charts. And we're looking at a spark score of almost 137, which is 97th percentile. In all of his workout metrics, he was above 95 percentile. And that's acceleration, strength, speed, all those different things, all way super high. And he's 6'6", 247 pounds. And why would you buy now? Well, even if they have Tua, I think that Mike Gesicki is going to still make another step. But if they trade for a different quarterback, if for some reason, which I would put Watson's best chances of landing somewhere, not the Jets, I would think it's Miami. And if that happens, I think Mike Gesicki just shoots up, and all of a sudden we're looking at potentially a tight end 5-6 type, flirting into the ranges of the Mark Andrews type of seasons. So Mike Gesicki is. He had 298 slot targets, which is second among tight ends, and he had 11.9 target distance among tight ends, which is number 2 as well. So he has great metrics. He didn't have, again, he had very inconsistent quarterback play, which is a lot of what you hear about a lot of these wide receivers. But Fitzpatrick was good, sometimes doesn't like tight ends, and then Tua was still developing and trying to figure out his own. So my number 5, and I give you a bonus because this is going to be 5 and 6. So this is going to be 2 players on the same team in the same position. And so the first one is going to be Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, I understand he will be 29 coming up soon. But what Raheem Mostert gives is a player that when he's on the field, and that's a big if, he does super well. We're talking 8 games, 521 yards, and 156 yards receiving. So we're talking almost 100 yards a game. And we're talking a lot of touchdown potential because they run a ton of touchdowns. He only has a $3.6 million cap. I don't think he's getting cut. We have McKinnon and Coleman are going to be free agents. So those are not going to be the 2 buys, of course. I think it's going to be Mostert. And I wouldn't be surprised. We hear about, they're going to draft a running back. They're going to draft a running back. I could see them going through the draft and not drafting a running back, and then all of a sudden you're stuck with Mostert, and then the next guy that I'm talking about is going to be Jeff Wilson Jr. I think if you can combine and somehow get both of those players, you're talking about, especially if you just need a fill-in gap at RB2 or RB3, these 2 players combined could have, last year they combined for over 1,100 yards rushing. You could have that this next year. If you talk about 1,100 yard rusher, with 300 yards receiving and let's just say 10, 15 touchdowns, that is what you're potentially getting as a combination of 2020 them and then what you could potentially get 2021 them. And that's with Coleman and McKinnon there. And I don't think they're either of them are coming back. So Jeff Wilson had 11 games. He didn't really start a couple of them. He only rushed the ball 3 times for a couple of those games. But he had 600 yards and 7 touchdowns, 13 receptions, 133 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Say that 10 times fast. 13, 133, and 3. That's a lot of threes. And he agreed to a 1-year contract. So he's going to be there next year. So I'm looking for a fill-in gap. What can I get for both of those players? And going to say, hey, Mostert's 29. You're not going to get much out of them. If you're looking 4 that kind of fill in, like, I need that RB2 or RB3 throughout the season. This is potentially a great way of band-aiding that for a year or two. And hopefully you can get like a combo of, again, getting both of them. If I were to try to only get one, I would get Mostert because I think he's going to be the starter until he's hurt again. And I think he'll be the starter if let's say Wilson takes over, because Mostert's hurt again, and I think Mostert comes back. Mostert will be the starter again. It's just kind of this wave of up and down they do. So that is my best 5 buys, 5.5, whatever you want to call it. So this is Dynasty Dad's channel. Of course, we're re-uploading daily Dynasty football. Please subscribe, comment if there's any videos that you would like. We're going to keep trying to do this every single day here. Especially, it's going to be getting really exciting when the draft season starts coming, or the more free agents start moving teams. We saw a trade already with Goff and Stafford. I'm excited to see more of these. There's a lot of quarterbacks that could move and really change a lot of these values of teams. Quarterbacks make a huge difference, especially on touchdown potential and for a lot of these wide receivers. And we have a really good quarterback draft class coming in too. So that's a huge, huge upgrade for a lot of these teams. And it's going to be interesting to see some of these values shoot up and some of these values shoot down depending on how these teams and these GMs work through these processes. All right. I will see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.